There are moments in life when silence speaks louder than victory, when the soul stands alone before heaven and realizes that every unseen struggle was being watched. You may have believed your trials were random, your pain unnoticed, your tears wasted in the dark corners of ordinary days. Yet what if those very moments were examinations, quiet, sacred tests, designed not to destroy you, but to reveal who you truly are? The world measures success by applause and recognition, but God measures the heart by endurance, faithfulness, and love when no reward is visible. Many people misunderstand divine testing. They imagine it as punishment, as though hardship were proof of abandonment. But a test is never given to someone who is unworthy. It is given to someone capable of passing. Gold is not placed into fire because it is worthless, but because it is precious enough to be refined. Likewise, the chosen soul often walks through misunderstanding, betrayal, and loneliness, not because God has turned away, but because heaven is shaping a strength that comfort could never produce. Think about the times you chose kindness when bitterness felt easier. Consider the moments you remained silent when you had every right to defend yourself, or when you forgave someone who never apologized. These decisions seemed small, perhaps even foolish in the eyes of others. Yet each choice echoed beyond the visible world. Every act of patience, every refusal to repay evil with evil, became an answer written on the test placed before you. The deepest trials often come through people rather than circumstances. Strangers may wound us lightly, but those closest to us possess the power to hurt deeply. Words spoken carelessly, trust broken unexpectedly, loyalty exchanged for betrayal. These experiences leave marks that cannot be seen but are deeply felt. And still, within those moments lies the question heaven asks: will you become hardened, or will you remain faithful to goodness? It is easy to believe in justice when fairness arrives quickly. It is much harder to believe when wrongdoers seem to prosper while the faithful endure loss. Yet divine justice does not operate according to human impatience. God's timing moves with purpose, not haste. What appears delayed is often being prepared with precision. The chosen ones learn to wait, not because waiting is comfortable, but because trust grows strongest where certainty is absent. Passing God's test rarely feels like triumph. More often, it feels like exhaustion. You may have reached nights where you wondered whether doing right truly mattered. You may have questioned whether your integrity was worth the cost. But unseen growth was taking place. Faith matured quietly. Character deepened. Compassion expanded. The soul was being shaped into something capable of carrying blessings without being destroyed by them. Those who hurt you may never understand the role they played in your transformation. They acted from their own fears, weaknesses, or blindness, unaware that their actions became instruments in a greater story. This does not excuse wrongdoing, but it reveals a mystery. Even pain can be redirected toward purpose. God does not author cruelty, yet he possesses the power to weave even human failure into redemption. There is a profound difference between revenge and divine justice. Revenge seeks satisfaction. Divine justice seeks restoration of truth. When people harm us, our instinct cries out for immediate balance, for visible consequences. But God's way often removes the burden of judgment from our hands. The chosen soul is not called to carry vengeance, because vengeance corrodes the heart meant to receive blessing. Instead, something unexpected begins to happen. While others focus on the injury, God focuses on the injured heart. Healing becomes preparation. Loss becomes clearing ground for something new. The very wounds meant to weaken you become openings through which grace enters. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, strength replaces resentment. You may not realize it yet, but endurance itself is evidence that you have already passed part of the test. Many abandon faith when life becomes unfair. You continued searching for meaning. Many allow pain to redefine them. You continued hoping for goodness. That persistence is not ordinary. It signals a soul aligned with something eternal. The chosen ones are not perfect people. They doubt, struggle, and sometimes feel overwhelmed. Yet they return again and again to trust, even when answers remain hidden. Their victory is not loud or dramatic. It is steady. It is the quiet decision to believe that goodness matters, even when darkness appears stronger. And as the test concludes, a shift begins, often subtle at first. Doors open where resistance once stood. Peace appears where anxiety once ruled. Not because suffering earned a reward like a transaction, but because transformation prepared the soul to receive what was always intended. God's blessings are not merely gifts, they are responsibilities entrusted to hearts refined through trial. What happens next is not driven by human revenge or coincidence, but by divine response. The story does not end with the pain inflicted upon you. It moves toward revelation. For when God begins to deal with injustice, he does so in ways that reveal truth, protect the faithful, and awaken understanding in ways no human plan could achieve. And in that unfolding moment, the chosen begin to see that every test they endured was leading to something far greater than survival. It was leading to awakening. There is a quiet moment that arrives in every life when a person begins to realize that their struggles were not meaningless interruptions, but carefully placed examinations of the heart. At first, hardship feels accidental, like a storm that wandered into the wrong sky. We assume pain is proof that something has gone wrong, that we have somehow been forgotten or overlooked. Yet spiritual testing rarely announces itself with explanation. It comes disguised as disappointment, delay, rejection, or injustice, asking questions without using words. The soul is left to respond not through speeches, but through choices. A divine test does not measure intelligence, talent, or outward success. It measures what remains within you when comfort disappears. Anyone can speak of faith when life moves smoothly, when relationships are kind and opportunities arrive easily. But faith revealed under pressure carries a different weight. It is the faith that continues when prayers seem unanswered, when doors close repeatedly, and when the world offers reasons to grow cynical. In those moments, heaven is not observing how loudly you believe, but how faithfully you live. Often the test begins where expectations collapse. You trusted someone who betrayed you. You worked honestly yet were overlooked. You showed kindness and received indifference in return. These experiences create an inner tension, a question that presses against the heart. Will you allow disappointment to reshape your character, or will you remain anchored in goodness despite what has happened? The test is not about avoiding pain. It is about discovering where that pain will redefine who you are. There is something profoundly transformative about enduring misunderstanding. When others misjudge your intentions or speak falsely about you, the natural desire is to defend yourself immediately. Yet sometimes silence becomes part of the examination. Not a silence born of weakness, but one born of trust. The belief that truth does not ultimately depend on constant self-defense. In choosing restraint, the soul learns humility, and humility creates space for deeper strength to grow. Many people believe strength appears through dominance or control, but spiritual strength develops through surrender. This surrender does not mean accepting injustice as good. Rather, it means refusing to allow bitterness to take root. Bitterness promises protection, but delivers imprisonment. It convinces the wounded heart to build walls so high that even healing cannot enter. Passing the test requires resisting this temptation. It asks you to remain open to compassion when closing yourself would feel safer. Time plays an important role in divine testing. Human beings crave quick resolutions, immediate fairness, and visible outcomes. Waiting feels unbearable because it removes certainty. Yet waiting exposes what impatience hides. It reveals whether hope depends on results or on trust itself. In long seasons of uncertainty, faith matures quietly, much like roots growing beneath soil long before any sign of life appears above ground. The absence of visible progress does not mean nothing is happening. Often the most important growth occurs where eyes cannot see. Another part of the test emerges through comparison. Watching others succeed while you struggle can awaken doubt. You may wonder why integrity seems unrewarded, while dishonesty advances, without consequence. The temptation arises to abandon your values in order to achieve faster results. Yet this moment becomes a defining question. Do you pursue goodness because it benefits you, or because it is true? When you choose integrity without immediate reward, you demonstrate a loyalty that transcends circumstances. Pain also reveals hidden motives. Hardship strips away illusions about control and self-sufficiency. It reminds us that human strength alone is fragile. This realization can feel unsettling, yet it opens the door to dependence on something greater than oneself. The soul begins to understand that reliance on God is not weakness, but alignment with reality. True peace emerges not from controlling every outcome, but from trusting that meaning exists, even within uncertainty. Forgiveness often stands at the center of the test. Forgiveness does not deny wrongdoing or erase memory. It releases the burden of carrying hatred. Holding resentment feels justified, even righteous at times, but it slowly consumes the one who carries it. To forgive is to step out of the cycle of injury and retaliation. It is an act of courage that declares pain will not determine the future. In this way, forgiveness becomes evidence that the test is being passed, because it reflects a heart shaped by grace rather than revenge. As the testing continues, subtle changes begin to occur within. Reactions become calmer. Perspective widens. Compassion grows even towards those who fail to understand you. You begin to notice that circumstances which once shattered your peace no longer possess the same power. This transformation does not happen suddenly. It develops through repeated decisions to choose faith over fear. Each small act of trust strengthens the soul, preparing it for responsibilities yet unseen. What makes divine testing remarkable is that its true purpose is revealed only afterward. While you are inside the trial, everything feels uncertain and heavy. Only later do you recognize how patience replaced impulsiveness, how empathy replaced judgment, how resilience replaced despair. The test was never meant to prove your worth to God, for your worth was already known. It was meant to reveal your strength to yourself. And when a person begins to see this truth, suffering loses its power to define them. The past no longer appears as a chain of wounds, but as a path of preparation. Every tear, every moment of endurance, every choice to remain faithful becomes part of a larger shaping process. The soul realizes that passing God's test was never about perfection. It was about persistence, the steady refusal to abandon light even when walking through darkness. One of the most difficult truths for the human heart to accept is that the deepest wounds often come through other people. Circumstances may challenge us, but it is betrayal, rejection, and misunderstanding that truly test the soul. There is something uniquely painful about being hurt by those we trusted, those whose words once brought comfort, or those we believed would stand beside us when life grew heavy. When such pain arrives, it does not merely touch the surface of life. It reaches inward, questioning our sense of worth, safety, and belonging. Yet within this painful encounter lies another layer of divine testing, one that examines not only what we endure, but how we respond to those who cause our suffering. Human instinct naturally seeks fairness. When someone wrongs us, we feel an immediate desire for balance, for consequences that match the injury. This reaction feels justified because injustice disturbs the moral order we believe should govern the world. However, spiritual growth begins at the moment when we realize that responding to harm with equal harm only multiplies darkness. The test is not whether pain affects you. It inevitably will, but whether pain transforms you into something you were never meant to become. When hurt enters the heart, it often brings anger as its companion. Anger itself is not always wrong. It can be an honest recognition that something unjust has occurred. Yet anger easily evolves into resentment, and resentment quietly reshapes perception. It begins to color every memory, every interaction, every expectation. The wounded person may start to assume betrayal everywhere, guarding themselves so fiercely that trust becomes impossible. Passing the test requires recognizing this shift before it hardens into identity. There is a mysterious freedom found in refusing to allow another person's wrongdoing to dictate your character. Those who hurt you may act from insecurity, fear, jealousy, or blindness to the consequences of their actions. While their behavior remains their responsibility, your response becomes yours alone. The divine examination lies here. Will you allow another's failure to determine the direction of your soul, or will you remain anchored in principles greater than circumstance? Often, the most painful aspect of being hurt is the lack of acknowledgement. Apologies may never come. Understanding may never arrive. The offender may continue life unchanged, seemingly untouched by the damage they caused. This absence of closure can feel unbearable, because the human heart longs for recognition of truth. Yet spiritual maturity begins when healing no longer depends on another person's awareness. Waiting endlessly for validation places your peace in someone else's hands. The test invites you to release that dependence and find stability in God's understanding, rather than human approval. Forgiveness becomes central in this stage, though it is frequently misunderstood. Forgiveness does not mean pretending the wound was small or insignificant, nor does it require immediate reconciliation or the removal of healthy boundaries. Instead, forgiveness is the decision to stop allowing past injury to poison present life. It is an act of spiritual courage, choosing freedom over emotional captivity. In forgiving, you are not excusing the offender. You are refusing to carry a weight that was never meant to define your journey. Many people fear that letting go of resentment means justice will never occur. Yet divine justice operates differently from human retaliation. Humans seek visible outcomes. God seeks restoration of truth. Sometimes justice appears as consequences that unfold naturally over time. Sometimes it appears as exposure of hidden realities, and sometimes it appears as transformation within the wounded person, where peace itself becomes victory. The test asks whether you trust that justice exists beyond your immediate control. Pain also teaches discernment. After being hurt, the soul learns to recognize the difference between genuine love and empty promises. You begin to see character more clearly, understanding that words alone cannot define trustworthiness. This awareness is not meant to make you cynical but wiser. Passing the test does not mean remaining naive. It means allowing wisdom to grow without allowing compassion to die. There is also a quiet strength that develops when you resist the urge to constantly explain yourself. Being misunderstood can feel unbearable because identity seems threatened. Yet truth possesses endurance that opinion lacks. Over time, authenticity reveals itself without force. The soul learns that peace does not come from convincing everyone, but from living honestly before God. This realization frees you from exhausting battles for approval and allows energy to return to growth rather than defense. As healing progresses, something unexpected happens. Having experienced pain, you begin to recognize hidden struggles in others. The wounds that once felt purely destructive become sources of understanding. You listen more deeply, judge less quickly, and respond with gentleness where once there might have been impatience. In this way, suffering becomes a teacher, shaping a heart capable of compassion that comfort alone could never produce. The divine test involving human hurt ultimately reveals a profound truth. Your identity is not determined by what others have done to you. It is formed by the choices you make afterward. Every time you choose patience instead of revenge, clarity instead of bitterness, and faith instead of despair, you step closer to the person you were created to become. The harm inflicted upon you loses its power when it no longer controls your direction. And slowly, almost without notice, the weight begins to lift. Memories that once caused sharp pain become quieter. The need for vindication fades. Peace arrives not because the past changed, but because you changed in relation to it. You discover that surviving hurt was only part of the journey. Rising above it was the true purpose. In that rising, the soul passes another sacred examination, proving that even in a world capable of causing deep wounds, love and integrity can still endure. There comes a stage in every spiritual journey when waiting becomes the greatest challenge of all. After enduring trials and surviving the wounds caused by others, the heart naturally longs for resolution. We expect clarity to arrive quickly, justice to appear visibly, and blessings to replace suffering without delay. Yet divine timing rarely follows human expectation. Instead, life enters a season that feels suspended between promise and fulfillment, where nothing seems to move forward, and yet nothing fully ends. This period of waiting is not emptiness. It is another form of testing, one that shapes the inner life with quiet persistence. Waiting, confronts the illusion that control belongs to us. Human beings prefer measurable progress, signs that effort leads directly to reward. When results delay, doubt begins to whisper. We question whether our faith was misplaced, whether endurance truly mattered, or whether goodness holds any real advantage in a world that appears indifferent. The silence of unanswered hopes can feel heavier than active suffering, because uncertainty leaves the mind searching endlessly for explanation. Yet within that silence, something profound is being formed. Divine delay is not divine neglect. What appears inactive on the surface often hides preparation beneath. Just as seeds remain unseen beneath soil long before growth becomes visible, spiritual transformation develops internally before circumstances change externally. During waiting seasons, patience is not merely practiced, it is built. The soul learns to stand without constant reassurance, to trust without immediate evidence. This kind of trust cannot be learned quickly because it requires the surrender of anxiety's demand for certainty. One of the greatest struggles during waiting is comparison. You may see others advancing, receiving opportunities, finding recognition, or experiencing joy while your own path feels paused. Comparison creates the illusion that life is a race measured by visible milestones. It tempts the heart toward resentment or self-doubt, suggesting that you have been overlooked. Yet every life unfolds according to a unique design. What is preparation for one person may look like delay to another. Passing this test requires resisting the urge to measure divine purpose through someone else's timeline. Waiting also reveals hidden attachments. Many desires appear noble until they are delayed. Only then do we discover whether our peace depends entirely on receiving what we want. When hope becomes demand, frustration grows. But when hope remains trust, even delay can coexist with peace. The soul begins to understand that blessings are not meant to replace faith, but to deepen it. The waiting period gently loosens the grip of impatience, teaching that fulfillment loses meaning if the heart is not ready to carry it. During these seasons, ordinary days become sacred classrooms. Routine replaces excitement. Progress feels invisible. Yet consistency itself becomes an act of devotion. Choosing kindness daily, continuing honest work, maintaining faith without emotional reward. These quiet decisions shape character more deeply than dramatic moments ever could. The test asks whether you will remain faithful when inspiration fades and discipline becomes the only guide forward. Another hidden purpose of waiting is protection. Sometimes what we desire arrives later because earlier arrival would have harmed rather than helped us. Opportunities received before maturity can overwhelm. Relationships formed before healing can repeat old wounds. Success granted before humility can distort purpose. What feels like denial may actually be preservation, a merciful pause allowing growth to align with destiny. Though this truth is difficult to recognize while waiting, it becomes clearer in hindsight. The mind often tries to fill silence with fear. Without visible progress, imagination creates worst-case outcomes. Anxiety magnifies uncertainty, convincing us that nothing good is coming. Yet faith invites a different interpretation of silence. Instead of absence, silence can signify trust, the kind a teacher shows during an exam, allowing the student to apply what has already been learned. God's quietness does not indicate distance. It often indicates confidence in your growth. Waiting also refines motivation. When immediate reward disappears, actions reveal their true foundation. Do you continue doing good because it is right, or only because it produces results? This question stands at the center of spiritual maturity. Integrity practiced without recognition becomes deeply rooted, no longer dependent on applause or validation. The soul begins to act from conviction rather than outcome, discovering freedom in obedience to truth itself. As time passes, subtle transformation occurs. Restlessness softens into steadiness. The need for constant answers weakens. Gratitude emerges even in unfinished seasons. You begin to notice small blessings previously overlooked, the stability of ordinary moments, the quiet strength developed through endurance, the peace that grows independent of circumstance. Waiting, once perceived as punishment, gradually reveals itself as formation. There is also a growing awareness that life's meaning cannot be reduced to events alone. While you waited for external change, internal change quietly reshaped perception. You become less reactive, more reflective. Hope becomes less fragile because it is no longer tied solely to outcomes. The heart learns to live fully even before promises materialize. This transformation marks the passing of another spiritual examination, the ability to trust not only when blessings arrive, but while they are still unseen. Eventually, movement returns. Opportunities appear, clarity emerges, and paths open in ways that seem sudden yet strangely prepared. What once felt delayed now feels timed. You recognize that the waiting season was not empty time but essential preparation. Without it, you might have received blessings with impatience, insecurity, or fear. Because of it, you receive them with wisdom and gratitude. And in that realization, the soul understands a deeper truth. Waiting was never about postponement. It was about alignment. Every quiet day strengthened endurance. Every uncertain moment deepened faith, and every unanswered question expanded trust. The season that once felt like standing still was, in reality, a journey inward, one that prepared you to step forward, not merely changed by circumstances, but transformed at the very core of who you are. There is a turning point in the spiritual journey when the struggle is no longer about enduring pain or surviving delay, but about understanding transformation itself. After trials have tested faith and waiting has stretched patience, the soul begins to notice a quiet change within. Life on the outside may appear similar, yet the inner world has shifted. Reactions soften, fears lose intensity, and clarity begins to replace confusion. This stage reveals that God's work is often less about changing circumstances immediately and more about reshaping the person who walks through them. Transformation rarely announces itself dramatically. It unfolds slowly, almost invisibly, through countless small decisions made during difficult seasons. Each moment you chose peace instead of retaliation, trust instead of despair, or humility instead of pride became a thread woven into a new identity. At the time, these choices may have felt insignificant, but together they formed a foundation strong enough to carry future blessings. The soul realizes that growth was happening long before recognition arrived. One of the clearest signs of transformation is the change in how you interpret hardship. What once felt like personal rejection begins to appear as redirection. Situations that previously caused deep emotional turmoil now invite reflection instead of panic. This does not mean pain disappears, but its power changes. Instead of defining you, it becomes something you observe and learn from. The heart gains distance from suffering, allowing wisdom to guide responses rather than impulse. A transformed heart also develops discernment. Earlier in life, emotions may have determined decisions, leading to repeated disappointment. Through testing, however, perception sharpens. You begin to recognize patterns, intentions, and truths that once went unnoticed. Discernment does not create suspicion, it creates understanding. It allows love to exist alongside wisdom, preventing compassion from becoming self-neglect. This balance is one of the quiet gifts formed through spiritual refinement. Another change emerges in the relationship with approval. Before transformation, acceptance from others may have felt essential for peace. Praise uplifted, criticism wounded deeply, and misunderstanding caused unrest. Yet, through trials, dependence on external validation weakens. Identity becomes anchored in something more stable than opinion. You no longer feel compelled to prove your worth constantly, because worth is no longer questioned. Freedom arises from knowing that being understood by God matters more than being understood by everyone. Humility deepens during this stage as well. True humility is not self-rejection, but accurate self-understanding. Having experienced weakness, failure, and vulnerability, the soul becomes gentler towards both itself and others. Judgment fades because personal struggle has revealed how complex human behavior truly is. Compassion grows naturally, not as an effort, but as a reflection of lived experience. You begin to see others, not merely through their actions, but through the hidden battles they may be fighting. Transformation also alters the meaning of success. Earlier, ambitions may have centered on recognition, achievement, or comparison. After spiritual refinement, success becomes connected to peace, purpose, and alignment with truth. The desire to compete diminishes, replaced by the desire to grow. Joy begins to arise from faithfulness in small responsibilities rather than dramatic accomplishments. The soul discovers contentment not as resignation, but as harmony between inner values and outward life. There is also a noticeable shift in emotional resilience. Situations that once drained energy lose their ability to control your state of mind. This resilience does not come from emotional numbness, but from deeper stability. You learn that feelings, though real, are temporary visitors, rather than permanent rulers. By trusting God through previous storms, you gain confidence that future storms will also pass. Fear loses authority because experience has proven that survival and growth are possible even in uncertainty. Gratitude becomes more natural during transformation, not a forced positivity that ignores hardship, but a genuine awareness of grace, present even in imperfect circumstances. You begin to notice small mercies, a peaceful moment, a lesson learned, a quiet strength that was absent before. Gratitude reshapes perspective, allowing life to be experienced as a gift rather than a constant struggle for control. This change does not erase difficulties, but reframes them within a larger sense of meaning. Perhaps the most profound aspect of transformation is the release of the past's emotional hold. Memories remain, but they no longer dictate identity. Painful experiences lose their sharpness because they have been integrated into understanding rather than resisted. The soul stops asking why certain things happened and begins asking what they produced. This shift marks maturity, the movement from seeking explanations to embracing purpose. As transformation deepens, peace begins to appear without obvious cause. It arrives quietly, independent of perfect conditions. This peace is not fragile happiness, but steady assurance. You recognize that circumstances will continue to change, people will continue to disappoint, and uncertainty will remain part of life. Yet beneath all of this exists a stability untouched by external chaos. That stability becomes evidence of divine work completed within the heart. Relationships also change during this stage. You become less attracted to conflict and more drawn to authenticity. Conversations grow more meaningful because listening replaces the need to dominate. or defend. Boundaries become clearer, not from anger, but from wisdom. Love becomes healthier because it flows from wholeness rather than neediness. The transformation within you quietly reshapes the environment around you. Eventually, the soul understands that transformation was the true blessing hidden within every trial. The hardships were not interruptions to life's purpose. They were instruments shaping it. Without them, strength would remain shallow, compassion limited, and faith untested. Through them, identity becomes grounded in something unshakable. And in this realization, a new awareness dawns. God's greatest work was not simply preparing circumstances for you, but preparing you for circumstances. The person who emerges from testing is no longer the same one who entered it. Fear has given way to trust, confusion to clarity, and restlessness to peace. Transformation stands as quiet proof that every challenge carried meaning, guiding the soul toward a deeper understanding of itself and of the divine presence that shaped it all along. There comes a moment after transformation when the soul begins to witness the unfolding of what once seemed impossible to imagine. The long season of testing, the wounds endured, the waiting that felt endless, and the quiet inner changes all begin to connect in ways that reveal a larger design. This stage is not simply about receiving blessings. It is about understanding how God responds to faithfulness and how justice, mercy, and restoration move together in ways far beyond human expectation. What once appeared as scattered experiences now forms a coherent story, and the chosen soul starts to see that nothing was wasted. At first, this realization arrives gently. Small shifts occur, opportunities appear unexpectedly, relationships align differently. Peace settles where anxiety once lived. These changes may seem ordinary to others, yet to the one who has walked through deep trials, they carry profound meaning. The heart recognizes that doors opening now were once firmly closed, and paths once blocked have quietly cleared. It becomes evident that timing, not effort alone, governs many outcomes. What could not be forced earlier begins to unfold naturally when the season is right. One of the most striking aspects of this phase is the way justice reveals itself without personal intervention. During painful moments, the desire to defend yourself or prove others wrong may have felt overwhelming. Yet as time passes, truth often emerges on its own. Situations clarify, misunderstandings dissolve, and the consequences of actions unfold according to principles deeper than human control. The soul begins to understand that divine justice does not always arrive dramatically. Sometimes it appears through natural revelation, where reality itself exposes what was hidden. This realization changes the way you view those who caused harm. Instead of carrying resentment, you begin to see them as participants in a larger process that shaped your growth. Their actions, though painful, no longer define your emotional state. Compassion may even replace anger, not because wrongdoing was acceptable, but because you recognize how ignorance and brokenness influence human behavior. The burden of hatred lifts completely, replaced by freedom that allows you to move forward without emotional chains tied to the past. Blessings received after testing feel different from those received easily. They are approached with gratitude, rather than entitlement. Having experienced loss, you value stability. Having known loneliness, you appreciate genuine connection. Having endured uncertainty, you recognize peace as a gift rather than an assumption. This depth of appreciation transforms blessings into responsibilities. You understand that what you now possess, whether wisdom, opportunity, or inner peace, is meant not only for personal comfort, but also for service and encouragement to others. There is also a growing awareness of purpose. During earlier struggles, survival may have been the only focus. Now clarity begins to emerge regarding why those experiences were necessary. Your story gains the power to guide others who walk similar paths. Words carry weight because they arise from lived truth rather than theory. Compassion becomes active, expressed through patience, understanding, and quiet support for those still in their testing seasons. In this way, past suffering becomes a source of light rather than shadow. Another change occurs in how success is understood. Achievement is no longer measured solely by external results, but by alignment with divine intention. Peace becomes more valuable than recognition, integrity more meaningful than advantage. You realize that blessings are safest in hands shaped by humility. Without the refining process, success might have produced pride or fear of loss. Because of transformation, it now produces gratitude and generosity. Trust deepens during this stage. Looking back, you begin to see patterns of protection that were invisible at the time. Situations that once felt like rejection now appear as guidance away from harm. Delays that caused frustration reveal themselves as preparation. Even painful endings show signs of hidden mercy. This retrospective clarity strengthens faith, creating confidence that future uncertainties will also carry unseen purpose. The soul learns to rest not in predictable outcomes, but in trust built through experience. Peace becomes more consistent, not because life becomes perfect, but because perspective has changed permanently. Challenges still arise, yet they no longer provoke the same fear. You have learned that difficulty does not signal abandonment. Instead, it often signals growth continuing in new forms. This understanding creates emotional stability that remains steady even when circumstances fluctuate. The heart becomes less reactive and more anchored, able to face the unknown without losing hope. Gratitude expands beyond personal blessings to include the journey itself. You begin to appreciate even the seasons you once wished to escape. Without them, strength would remain shallow and faith untested. The realization dawns that God's blessings were present long before visible rewards appeared. Protection, guidance, and transformation were themselves forms of grace, working quietly beneath the surface of ordinary days. In this stage, forgiveness reaches completion. Not only have you released others, but you also release yourself from regret, self-doubt, and the belief that you should have avoided every mistake. You recognize that growth often requires walking through imperfection. Acceptance replaces self-condemnation, allowing peace to settle deeply within. The soul stands lighter, no longer weighed down by past versions of itself. As life moves forward, a quiet confidence replaces striving. You no longer chase validation or fear opposition as before. There is assurance that what is meant for you will arrive without manipulation, and what leaves was never meant to remain. This confidence is not arrogance but trust, a calm awareness that God's guidance continues beyond the visible horizon. And so the journey reaches a new beginning rather than an ending. The chosen soul understands that blessings are not merely rewards for passing tests, but invitations into deeper purpose. God's response to suffering was never limited to correcting injustice. It was to transform the heart so completely that peace, wisdom, and compassion could flourish regardless of circumstance. What emerges is a life no longer defined by what others did, but by what God created through every trial. A life marked by quiet strength, enduring faith, and the unmistakable evidence that every test carried the promise of restoration.